My name is Lon Safko, co-author of the Social Media Bible, published by John Wiley & Sons, the largest book ever written on the subject of social media. And today, we're here with Chris Heuer, founder of the Social Media Clubs internationally, as well as the author of the Social Media Playbook, also published by John Wiley & Sons. And we'll be speaking today about social media, Chris's new book, and about the Social Media Club. So let's jump into it. Chris, could you please tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on?
Thanks, Lon. I really appreciate getting involved in this with you, and been watching it go for a while, as you know, of course. I'm happy to see it continue and grow and flourish. So hopefully we'll help people learn a little bit more about all those different elements out there we were talking about before. When I got started in really interactive was 1994. I read a book by Howard Rheingold, who I'm now thankfully able to call a friend, who has done some amazing work since, but it was called Virtual Community. And I read that pretty much every day after work at the Barnes & Noble at the time, because they didn't really have a lot of internet distribution for people like me. And as a result of that, I ended up starting a company with a bunch of friends down in South Florida called Guru Communications. And there, all of a sudden, it's 24 and a half, 25, somewhere around there. I started getting involved in interactive. And so from the beginning, for me, it's been about community elements, and we used to talk about it. And in fact, Howard, in the book Virtual Community, talked about it as, the idea of social computing. And until a few years ago, when Chris Shipley and a couple others around the same time started calling it social media, it really created this mind shift across the way. And as a result of those activities, I got back into it. But a brief overview of some of the other pieces. I've taught interactive marketing at Miami Ad School. I did web design and multimedia classes there as well. Wow. Also got a good chance to learn some things for some people like typography and some other important Photoshop skills I get to use every now and then. And I've been involved in just a lot of different things, I mean, I was chief of e-business at the U.S. Mint for a little while.
Did you really?
Launched e-commerce programs. So, I mean, I've been in all different elements of this, as well as actually being a software architect, developing a content management system that was in use by a major Fortune 1000 company.
Wow.
And so I have a really diverse background: business, technology, media, publishing. I also sold advertising at Miami New Times, which is one of the alternative weeklies. And I've just been involved in a lot of different things. So coming into this is really just the culmination of a lot of experiences that I've had, and being able to look back and reflect on what I'm doing in it. So I understand through personal experience, and it's an interesting thing when you start looking at it from that perspective, because the one thing we tell people when we're trying to teach them about social media is it's not something you can learn only from a book. It's something you have to go do. And I guess by having done this for the last 15 years or so in one form or another, 14, I guess I would call as a professional, 1 year dabbling before. And what we'd be looking at in terms of how people really understand it is by doing. And so with all of our clients, when we talk about even setting up a blog, we try to recommend people, maybe just set up a private blog for a few friends and really just get out and try it. See what it's like being able to hit that publish button and have your words show up on a web page without you having to, really have much technical skills at all. Having to be able to just go in and click record button on your laptop enabled with a video camera and record a message and upload that, and all of a sudden have your own voice out on YouTube. I mean, these are just some very powerful things that you have to experience in order to really understand.
You really do. The first time that I published my first blog, and I uploaded my first video and audio as well, it really was exciting for me to think that my little piece of creativity actually was available to anybody who wanted to see it worldwide. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's very exciting, and there's an interesting debate, as you know, that's raged on between some people like Andrew Keene and others who say this is a very terrible thing for us because it's just going to get a lot more, non-creative people, non-eloquent people creating media and talking in video and audio about things that they don't know about, spreading more falsehoods and all these other problems. But, there is going to be a little bit of bad with the good. But in the end, the great thing about this system, as you know from blogging, is it's self-correcting.
Yeah.
If I write something and it turns out that I'm incorrect with it, you can almost assuredly bet that somebody is going to go ahead and correct that information. And in fact, Robert Scoble, as you know, that's one of his famous strategies that he employed very early in terms of how he was able to be so prolific with his blogging activities and with everything he was able to get done. It was about not being afraid of being wrong, knowing that it was going to get corrected. Now, I didn't always agree with that, because there's sometimes you're wrong, and 50,000 people or 100,000 people might end up getting the wrong information before it gets corrected. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a little unfortunate thing as you get to a certain size in terms of the responsibility you have as a citizen of this online community and the social world we live in. But again, even that can end up balancing itself out a little bit and try to get those genies back in the bottle through the ongoing conversation. But it requires people to really be citizens. It requires people to really participate within their communities of interest. And there's also a lot of work going on in geographies. I met a couple of blogging mayors in the past year that are very, very interesting and doing great things by connecting directly with their constituents. So it's really a fascinating time on all elements in terms of the entertainment side and the ability of self-expression, as well as getting into the civic responsibility areas, and of course the emergence of citizen journalism and many of the other elements that serve the social side of that, as well as the social entertaining side of that.
I like the fact that you brought up the point that it's kind of self-policing. When you do something wrong or you say something that's kind of out of line, there's plenty of people there to kind of slap you back into line. And I've made a couple of mistakes on the internet as well. But I like that because I don't want to be wrong. I really do want the information that I send out to be as best as possible. And then one of the other things that I'm just starting to notice too is FCC and censorship. I think one of the things that's kind of exciting, at least I'm finding about social media, is that there isn't any really severe censorship on this, that the community basically kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, it does, but it's more interesting. I mean, of late, I've seen a little bit of cliquish stuff forming, and of course, it's one of the reasons why we created Social Media Club, was to ensure that we could really have people collaborating better together. But we're in an emerging industry with social media, as you know. Still, it still hasn't matured yet. So there's naturally going to be differences of opinions and values and things that are going to be shifting over time, where people get together in different groups. We just really want to see more people collaborating across the different groups. There's a point of scale really hits inside of here, of course. But at the same time, there's some really great ways we can, share tags and other ways of actually connecting across our systems and across our different corners of the social media world in order to be able to accomplish our goals and to meet people who we need to connect with.
Really well spoken. I totally agree with you. Just to take a little bit of a step backwards, your name kind of is synonymous with social media because of the work that you're doing out there. If someone didn't know what the definition of social media was, and I know that question right there could probably fill 2 or 3 hours of podcasts, how would you kind of summarize and explain to people really what social media is?
I'm gonna first quote my friend Ian Kennedy from Yahoo, who had one of the best answers I've ever received in asking that question, which was, "It's not something; it's what you do with it."
I like that.
So, really, the idea that it's not a noun; it's action. It's social media. It's what we're doing and what we're doing with media. And when I really look at it, I come back to the social computing stuff and a little more technical, I guess. But really, it's just those two words put together, modified as you might imagine. There's a social element to it, which is involving connecting with others. Mm-hmm. And that's really, to me, what it's all about. And, of course, media is a reference to a medium, which is something we connect through or with or whatever verb you want to apply to it, of course. But the idea being is this is something we connect with other people through. And that is the sharing of common stories, going back to cave paintings and I mean, really back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Cave paintings was the original social media, I think, right? Story to story, it was visual, it had so many different elements to it. But when we really get down to the bottom of it, it's how we interact with one another. Mm-hmm. And some people like video, some people like audio, some people like, let's just say tooling on people, giving them a hard time. Some people are good people who like to help. And it really just reflects, once again, our overall humanity. And the interesting thing is that a majority of the dialogue is about the positive dialogue, the aspirational elements of, how can we do this better? To your point earlier about the, you don't want bad information out there. Well, it's interesting as an attitude because it means you're willing to admit you're wrong. And there's still a lot of people out there who think that admitting you're wrong is, a weakness as opposed to a strength. So I think it's a very important attitudinal element that you bring to it as you get that experience that we were talking about before.
Yeah, those are really great points. And in a previous interview, it was kind of brought up about social media when we were talking about the definition. My observation is exactly what you said, is that humans, the basic part of human nature is to socialize or to communicate with each other. And now the only difference really is that we have some digital tools through this digital convergence that's giving us a new way to do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 6,000 years.
Correct, but of course without the boundaries of time or geography.
That's really exciting.
And there's one other really exciting bit, right? Which is, I should have added this the first time, which is time, geography, and money.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you can go into an internet cafe with $1 in your hand and, put out a piece of citizen advocacy by just logging on to, the internet computer there. You don't need to have a computer. You don't even need to have a video camera or, any special real equipment. If you're looking for distributing it more widely, of course, you want to have some more professional stuff in there. Yeah. But the point is, it's really the democratizing of the access to information and the ability to share that information and publish, in essence.
Yeah, I really love that because 15, 20 years ago, if you wanted to publish, you had to be a major New York publisher. If you wanted to do something on television, you needed $250,000 or $500,000 budget. Even if you just wanted to run a radio campaign, you'd have to have $25,000 or $30,000. And for the small business people, it was cost prohibitive. But now, for the first time in history, we have access to all of those tools through RSS and social media tools. Basically, as you said, for free. That's amazing.
Yeah, it goes back to, they talk about the original opening of the doors of the internet to, a broader audience back in the early 90s, I guess, as being, the biggest step. But, in retrospect, what's happening now is much more so because it's making it accessible to the average everyday person. And in fact, there's arguments to be made that the same thing happened with TV, the same thing happened, with newspapers and print. But what we really go back to historically in terms of the greater significance of this era that we're living in now and the access to these technologies is back to the Renaissance days, where we were looking at, it used to be there's only a few hand transcribed Bibles that were going around, but as soon as we were able to, make books that were vastly available for inexpensive, but the equivalent of, $2 to $3 would be at the same time. The last time we saw such a flourish of activity and creativity, and when you have all these different people interacting and sharing their ideas and correcting their wrong ones, and being able to be creative and express themselves in new ways, and collaborate on how we're actually able to build technologies to do this. We are, in the lines of some people would say, approaching the singularity, but it's actually much simpler than that. It really is just a matter of us finally being able to, balance the system, the ecosystem that we're in, for our mental competencies and for our ability to control our world to one degree and to another, to interact within it. And again, as I said before, one of the great things is that the majority of the people involved in this is aspirational towards how we can use it for positive ends. So to everyone's benefit at the end of the day. And the interesting thing I get when I talk to people about this, because it sounds a little California-ish, hippie-ish, however people might want to say around it, but it really is about the market. It's actually understanding that, information efficiency in a market allows people to make the correct purchasing decision. It allows people to not make the wrong decision with regards to hiring people because this person has, troubled issues with knives or some, weird thing going on about them, right? So when we get this access to near perfect information, it's actually better for the overall market, and it will continue to accelerate our ability to, innovate and create new things and solve old problems we never thought were solvable in incredibly interesting ways, like Kiva, for instance, right? You're very familiar with Kiva, I imagine.
Yes.
The idea of social lending. It's just, who would have thought of it that way, a few years ago. I certainly didn't.
Right.
And I've been looking to the future for a long time, but I never saw anything like that come along.
Never would have
But
guessed.
the idea is that I have $100 sitting in my Kiva account that I keep reinvesting in 4 different projects, $25 at a time, and able to just be a part of helping somebody, in Africa and Thailand and actually I think there's somebody in the Philippines I just funded recently who is doing a new cafe. It's just a fascinating time.
That is really amazing. And the two things that I'm hearing also coming out of your conversation, which seems to be a common theme in social media, of course, is this trusted network. By getting out and working with people that you trust and knowing their reputations and building this network, that you can actually get better employees, you can get better recommendations on products. And the other thing that you had mentioned, too, that I thought it was kind of interesting I want to point out is this global thing again. Too often, I think in the U.S. we're kind of U.S.-centric and only really think of the U.S. and how we do social media. But recently I had an interview with Kevin Marks, who's with Google Open Social, and he started his conversation with is that these perceived competitors from all over the world are actually coming together to build standards for this social media information exchange. I think that's absolutely amazing. Communist countries even.
Well, they have to. I mean, Lawrence Lessig has a wonderful presentation on the need for standards out there, and we actually even consider his work around Creative Commons a sort of standard because it allows for the, easier interaction of people and processes and organizations. But it's an amazing thing, and his best analogy that I've always liked is the core one, which is the train tracks. Back in the day, when trains first started coming out, there was a couple of different competing train track widths.
Right.
So that meant if you built a particular train of, say 30 inches wide, and the tracks you were about to ride on were made for 28-inch wide trains, really made it hard for things to get around. They had to offload at different points and load back on, all this extra labor and stuff. So what standards allows us to do is actually move beyond that sort of inefficiency and wastefulness and, really get the most potential out of each thing in terms of our time, in terms of our financial, in terms of the ability to generate new benefits out of it. And it's just been a fascinating thing to watch over the past couple of years, how that really has been just accelerating at an incredible pace as a result of more people being comfortable with sharing openly. I mean, you're even seeing some open source business models start popping up, and you have that open source beer that's out there, where a whole bunch of people are working on this beer recipe collaboratively and sharing it. So it's quite an amazing opportunity to focus on these standards and how everything's going to intersect. And at the end of the day, everyone benefits from it.
Yeah, and I've been in the computer industry as well since the mid-'70s, so I am a techno geek. And one of the things that I've always liked is that saying in the computer industry is the nice thing about the computer industry is we have so many standards. But this is the first time that I've seen early on in an industry where people are proactively going out and trying to standardize to build up the industry as a whole and not create their own little fiefdoms that protect their own particular type of information.
Well, this is the incredible importance of social media in terms of the power shift from institutions to individuals.
Yeah.
The ideas behind open social, David Recording, Joseph Smar, and all those guys, they just said, this is what we want to do, and they started working on it. And then all of a sudden, there's this huge standards movement behind it, where the other companies like Google and others, like where Kevin's at, realize that the important thing here is that it all works on the same. And realizing, of course, the other side of it, which is the closer they are to the development of it, the better off they are in a position to take advantage of it and, further grow their business.
That's a really good point.
This is a very, it can be very virtuous if people don't want to look at it through too cynical of an eye. But the amazing part really, again, is the power of the individual here. To be able to be a smart person, figure out a solution to a problem, build it yourself or with the team of a few friends, and be able to get so many people wanting to help you to build on top of it that you end up with, the next Linux or whatever that might be.
Right. And just to change the subject just a little bit, the social media clubs You
Yes.
woke up one morning and decided, I'm going to build the biggest social media clubs internationally around the world, and I'm going to start today. What kind of motivated you, prompted you to do it? Which, by the way, I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. Because if it wasn't for people like you believing in some of the ideals and talking with others about it, it would still be just me sitting here kind of waving my flag, I guess. I don't know what I'd be doing, quite honestly. I'd probably still be doing some computer consulting or something. But what it really came about was a lot of different things came together, again, at one time. The first thing was really the motivational element, which was having experienced the rise of the dot-com era and the interactive agencies and all that, going back into 94, 95, and watching it from the very early days, really, as it started to emerge, back where I was spending most of my time teaching people to click on hyperlinks instead of being able to, go into some of the deeper stuff. So we really had, at the time, not much education out there in the market about what the right things were to do. Then there was a great group out of New York called the New York New Media Association, and there was another one called WWAC, the World Wide Web Artists Consortium. And so I had kind of joined those from afar. I was in Miami at the time, and was able to, see what they were doing and how they were helping one another. And to an extent, I guess that's my first experience with that idea of open source, real sharing. And in fact, anytime we ran into a problem with our web shop, putting together a site or dealing with some Netscape issue or something silly like that, we would end up, going to the WAC list and asking for help. And inevitably somebody did. And in fact, one time very early on, I had some interactions with the founder of agency.com, just because, these are the people who were there. So I saw a little bit of the kind of Silicon Alley and multimedia mulch scene from afar and wanted to be a part of it. But at the time, I couldn't even get online half the time when I was traveling at a hotel because, there wasn't a dial-up port or something for me to use, and the hotel system prevented you from connecting. And
frustrating.
Certainly wasn't any wireless at that point.
Right.
So we weren't able to connect at that time, and we weren't able to do much widely. And this mailing list was really my only window into that world. The other thing that I saw back at that time was that there was, because of this non-connected aspects of information and not having easy access to everything that was out there, which is something it's hard to even think back to, isn't it, Lon?
It is. It's hard to believe.
We didn't have access?
Yeah. Well, I remember back in 1986 dialing up Apple in eWorld on a 300 baud modem. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, I actually, and I guess in 1980, about the same time, about 85, 86, I was working as a legal assistant in a law firm in D.C. while I was going to college. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, that would have been 88, 89. Okay, anyways, a couple years after you. So one of the lawyers showed me on to his deadhead BBS.
That was a big deal.
600 baud modem or something. But it's really hard to think back to that time where we couldn't have that instant access, where it wasn't an always-on world for us.
Right.
And, one of the things that happened as a result of that very inefficient market of information about what was happening with Interactive was certainly magazines. You saw the magazine industry rise because we had to get access to it somehow. That was really still the easiest way, although there were certainly some portals and some things coming around. But what happened in the business world was a little bit it was a bummer to me, really. We were doing sites, and in the end of the day, hey, I'll admit we were underbidding. It's one of the reasons why that agency really failed. We weren't billing enough and charging enough and doing those things necessarily, and the disciplines were tough at the time because no one knew what to do with it. So it was really hard to actually run and build that agency. And what we saw, though, was that we would go in and do bids and proposals on certain projects with clients, and they would end up having some big company come in and give them a quote for $100,000 for a 10-page website.
Crazy.
And it was just like it was really ridiculous, and it just really got to be one of my hot buttons after a while. I saw these people just getting taken to the cleaners for work that really, I mean, gosh, could there really be that many meetings about 10 web pages?
Yeah, and nowadays SEO, SEM is the same thing, and now even social media. You have these sharks out there that are selling snake oil.
Yeah, and so we really wanted to do Social Media Club to address those problems, really around the education and around the elements of ethics and actually everything we talk about, standards. I mean, we really have four missions. It's about actually sharing our lessons learned, sharing our best known methods, as my friends at Intel like referencing, or as other people like, and many people don't, best practices. So we can all learn from one another. Discussing the ethical issues of the day is another mission to ensure that, we know astroturfing isn't okay. Mm-hmm. And every now and then we got to have another session with people, because there's always new people entering into social media now, particularly companies. We have to go back and go through that astroturfing again. In fact, just to that point really quickly, it's a little aside, but I just want to point out that that's what Chris Brogan does phenomenally well. He has, the patience of a saint, is able to really help people learn the entry-level stuff into getting in. And, of course, he has a mind for the much deeper and bigger ideas as well. Yeah. But he's just been a great educator on that over the years. And so we're thankful to be friendly and working with him as well.
That's great.
But the third mission is actually one we hit on before, which is about the industry standards, promoting awareness around Creative Commons, which is a project we're undertaking now, doing a little fundraising for them, as well as trying to explain to people that, hey, this Creative Commons thing, this isn't about giving away all of your art or your music or anything. It's really about describing how you want to let others use it, so that you don't have to get into individual negotiations with 10,000 people about whether or not they can use your music or their music for your home video.
Right. That's a great project.
Yeah, it's a really important thing, too. But also data portability, open ID, and just supporting all these different elements that are out there to kind of help people understand from a business perspective which ones we think are the most important for them to understand. And then finally, the biggest and the one closest to my heart, really, on all of it, although everything obviously is, because Social Media Club has been one of those debt builders over the last couple of years, it is really the idea of media literacy.
Yeah.
And in fact, we have a we have a panel on South by Southwest next year, hopefully, if it gets voted in, called, Against All Odds, Towards a Media Literate World. And it really is something that seems almost impossible with the, poverty and the famine we have in certain corners of the world, and certainly we have problems here in the States as well with areas that are still having difficulty getting access. But we really think that, we all should be able to understand and use these technologies, for both consumption of information as well as the publishing of it. So we want to really, further along, help people even learn how to search. I think that I had joked a long time ago in a blog post about it used to be the 3 R's and now it's the 4 R's. It's reading, writing, arithmetic, and RSS.
I like that.
we could probably add it 4 R's and put an S on the end, because
great.
Search should be another one in there. Because if you can figure out how to enter a query into Google or Yahoo or any other search engine, you're going to get that information you need to not make a mistake, to do the right thing the first time, and to get that accurate information.
That's true.
And that's, again, the power of social media.
Well, and that's a great mission statement. I mean, you can't beat that. Those are really 4 powerful, righteous kind of goals. And obviously your vision was popular. How many social media clubs do you have now? Where are they?
Oh, gosh. I haven't been keeping up with count. It's never been about the numbers for me. I mean, even when we do our own events locally, which isn't often enough here in San Francisco, though we're working to change that. It's not about getting a few hundred people in a room. It's always about having a quality conversation and, having the opportunity to learn from each other. But we have chapters everywhere from, New York and London and Paris. Pierre is just doing some great work in Paris.
Wow.
We got a little stuff happening down in Brisbane, Australia with Des Walsh. Been talking to some people in Asia, specifically around Singapore and Malaysia, but there's nothing underway there yet. Stuff in Canada happening. We've got something going on in Detroit, Jason Falls in Louisville. LA just started up again recently, and Jackie Peters and Nicole Jordan down there, they've tapped in their entire network, and there's regularly 100 or so people or more going to those meetings. And without really doing a membership campaign, we've got just under 1,000 total members, including the free open members. And then we've got about 200 or so paying professional and small business members of some sort that actually paid some money in to kind of support the idea. And as a result of that, basic expenses have finally been covered as a result of it. But we've still got our money in the bank we've been holding on to do some other things along with these projects. And now we're working on a way to actually get some real funding in to hire a couple of full-time staff and really, operate this kind of central hub for all the different people involved in social media.
Cool.
Where we got into it more specifically to the chronology of events is a little interesting. I won't spend much time on it because I know I've been going on for a while.
Oh, I like it, though. It's great stuff.
Went to the first bar camp in, I guess it was 2005 now. Wow, 3 years ago. And it was just this transformative experience. And I almost didn't even make it there. I didn't even know about it, except for the fact that a good friend of mine now, Will Pate, was staying over at the house and was friends with Andy Smith, who ended up going to JICU. He was formerly with Flock, and Andy Smith's just a brilliant guy. Same with Will, of course.
Yeah.
But went down with him for the afternoon and saw how it was set up, and oh my God, I got to give a talk. I actually signed up on the board. Unfortunately, I was up against Robert Scoble, so I didn't really pull a crowd there. Maybe that's why I'm not so interested in the numbers. Oh, well. But it was just such a powerful, transformative experience that we've created another nonprofit called Brain Jams, that we were trying to take the unconference idea beyond the realm of technology people. And figure out ways to actually connect non-technologists with technologists. And, for a while we're talking with Chris Messina and a couple of the other key organizers there about ways we could work together and things we could do. So very supportive of their efforts and really realizing, the importance of this group-to-group collaboration,
right, that
you really needed to be able to amplify one another. And at the heart of social media is this idea that, together we are much stronger than myself alone.
Yeah, we are greater.
So how do we... Greater, thank you.
Yeah.
You have the quote. Please give me the quote.
Yeah, we is greater than me.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's a very good way of saying it. Thank you. So we started then focusing on group-to-group collaboration, and we did brain jams in New Orleans. We did it with a conference called the National Coalition for Deliberation and Dialogue. We did it here in San Francisco and Palo Alto at SRI, and it was really just a great sort of thing, but it was really very difficult to get together because it was really saying it would be the college major equivalent of undecided. Because there was no specific real topic. It was kind of loosely formed, and as a result of that, we were really focused on that interdisciplinary learning, how we can learn across disciplines.
Right.
And after a while of doing that and looking at it and going like, how do we, serve the needs of the community and the market in such a way that, is complementary to what else is going on out there. We saw that social media was an emerging practice, and all these other experiences I had from the early days of Interactive, of course, and looking at this and saying, you know what, we can actually do this interdisciplinary stuff around social media. And, have that kind of anchor or that, talking stick to pass around so that we can all have that common interest that binds us, even though, we're talking across disciplines to a scientist or a student or a, publisher or anyone else that's out there that's interested in talking about it.
So basically the social media clubs, after many, many years of hard work, became an overnight success.
Not yet. No, let me tell you, here's when I think it'll be a success.
Yeah.
It'll be a success when we can point to stories where somebody didn't get taken because they checked with the local social media club group and, found out who knew what was going on and who didn't. Yeah. And as a result of that, they're able to be successful instead of, as a small business owner, losing their $20,000 of hard-earned annual marketing budget. Somebody's unscrupulous. Yeah, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be successful when, we're able to, do some sort of real important ethical stand where, it really shapes people's opinion and dialogue because we were able to figure it out together. And, it's never been about me. I'm just a loud voice who screams a lot about this stuff. It really is all about everyone coming together and figuring it out, and it's difficult. And it requires patience, and it requires time, and
a lot of work.
If it ever becomes an overnight success, it'd be wonderful. But as long as we've made a little bit of difference so far by helping a few people, we're okay with where it's going.
Well, speaking about your voice, you have a new book coming up that's being published with my publisher, John Wiley and Sons, and it's called the Social Media Playbook.
Correct. If I can get it done. It's easy for me to talk. It's very hard for me to write. So we're running a little bit behind, and the folks at Wiley have been terrific, of course, as you know, from working with them.
They're great folks.
But we're busting our butt now to try to get these last pieces together and wrap this up and hopefully get it published out here in the fall. It really started as an idea that I think was really well explained in the wonderful book by Charlene Lee and Josh Burnoff around Groundswell, which I'm sure you've read by now a couple times perhaps. And, the ideas in there was really at the heart of the book that I was originally thinking about writing. And the way they developed the post methodology in particular, I think, was spot on. But what I saw was, looking for a strategic framework of how different companies were actually using social media and the way that I thought it should be engaged with. Literally, that question of where do we start?
Yeah.
How do we get underway with this stuff? And trying to find that pathway and looking at what everyone was doing and what was working and what wasn't, and looking back even to my sales training with the Zig Ziglar courses I've been through and Brian Tracy and a couple of those other guys. It's about knowing your customer. It's about knowing your market. So it was really straightforward. It starts with listening. So I basically one day when I was working with Shell Israel on one of our social media workshops, we were talking about these different things, and I emailed him really fast and excitedly about these 9 things that you needed to do. And it was like, the social media 9. Yeah, no, that's not going to work, Chris. Get it down to 3. Let's make it a little simpler.
Yeah.
Good advice for sure. And really hit upon this idea of listen, join, start.
I like that.
Start out by listening, but it's about discovering where people are, figuring out who they are, paying attention to what they're doing. And I use that phrase, paying attention, very specifically, because it is literally giving somebody something, an investment, if you will, in your time for doing it. And hopefully you get something good out of it. So we listen and we monitor what's going on of the important people as well as everyone else, so we can use the technology and understand that.
And that's
then ultimately it's, please go ahead, let's stop.
Oh, that's an interesting point that you bring out about listening. So often we don't, just like I just did, because I was interviewing Robert Scoble, and he kept coming around back to that too, is that don't just jump out and start shooting your mouth off or banging away at the keyboard. Look at where your customers are, understand it, understand the genre, the tone, and then participate. And it reminds me, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them proportionally.
Well, yeah, I only dropped that quote 3 times in the book so far, so we're going to have to pick which one stays. But absolutely, and that actually has been the one line that I've used over and over again in different speeches that I've given around that, because it is so true. There's an importance there, and it's about how do we actually find out what's going on. And it's observing. It's not only listening, though, but it's also looking. And, of course, as we realized with Groundswell and Robert and so many other people, this was pretty much that sort of universal truth around what you need to be able to be social with people.
Right.
Let alone be engaged with them through social media.
Boy, that's an excellent statement right there. That's absolutely correct. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners about social media and what you're doing? Kind of summarize?
Yeah, well, there's one word you hit on here before, and I'd just like to close out talking about that a little bit, because it's the participation side. The other big lesson that came for me out of that first bar camp was that participation is marketing. When I saw Robert Scoble giving his presentation on, I don't even remember what it was on.
Yeah.
All I remember is Robert.
Something good.
Actually, you know what? It wasn't even his presentation. I'm sorry. It was actually, they were Flock, I think it was Bart and somebody else, and Andy or somebody, was showing Flock to Robert Scoble, and that's why the other room was all packed, because he was going over it, and he was live critiquing it or whatever, and it was just this whole celebrity thing. It was very interesting, but I realized what he was doing for Microsoft there. He was getting this amazing advertising, look at this cool guy that totally geeky, totally loves our stuff, knows what he's talking about with some of this stuff, and looking straight at it, being able to interact with him as a human being, and all of the extra brand value that Microsoft got as a result of it.
Yeah, that was...
And so, that really is the most important element. It's participating. So you have to figure out who you are, who you are as yourself. Of course, the authenticity being one of the key principles that keeps getting bantered about. Well, authenticity means be yourself.
True.
Transparency means, by the way, be honest, which are some of the principles that I have in the book that we're talking about,
right,
and what that really means in the bigger picture of things and the consequences it has for violating that trust of the market.
Right.
But so I really encourage people to start listening and to participate in what's going on, and don't be focused on the technology so much as you are on the people and what we can do to interact with the people. And you'll find that some of your customers are very interested in reading your blogs. Some of them don't have time, and they just want your podcast, and many others just want to see your videos and be entertained. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. That's how the world works. That's how we are social with one another, respecting each other's differences, trying to encourage that diversity to a degree, and just be social with everyone that you can online who makes sense, and get out there and do it.
I love it. I love it. Where can they find out more information about some of the stuff you're doing, and particularly the social media club, so that they can support it, and really about your book too, the Social Media Playbook?
Well, socialmediaclub.org will have access to all of that stuff. Eventually, I think I'm listed under one of my team pages or something, but then I'm pretty much my name on most networks, Chris Heuer. So twitter.com/Chris Heuer, chrisheuer.com, on all the other major sites as well, I guess.
Okay. And, of course, your book is coming out soon, so you can look at that at the best booksellers out there.
Yeah. It was funny because it was supposed to be done already. I actually I saw the results once at Tower Online where my book came up, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write all day.
You got motivated.
Very inspiring to see that it was accidentally pre-listed because somebody didn't get the update that I was running behind.
That's cool. Cool. Okay, well, geez.
I'm really glad to see the Social Media Bible moving along, and really interesting project. And I'm glad you're building on top of our ability to learn how to do this collective, collaborative writing project together.
Well, thank you.
Is another great use of the technology in and of itself for us to continue to learn and get better, and hopefully not have to repeat some of the mistakes and things that you and I are making along the way as we go through this process.
Well, somebody's got to take the arrows.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you again. I'd really like to thank Chris Heuer, the founder of the Social Media Clubs internationally and author of the Social Media Playbook, published by John Wiley & Sons, for being with us here today and sharing those absolutely incredible insights on social media. This has been Lon Safko, the co-author of Social Media Bible. Be sure to check out our other valuable social media tactics, tools, and strategies that can be found in the Social Media Bible book, as well as our companion website. For more information about me, Lon Safko, that's easy. Go to www.lonsafko.com. And truly, Chris, thank you so very much for sharing those great insights with us today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.